Hey, this is Tonya, and welcome back to Nurses Speak. And for those of you who don't know, this is the channel for nurses, Black nurses, nurses of color, but open to all nurses. And so I just want to share briefly with you a most recent incident of workplace violence. Now, these are not my favorite videos to really produce, but I felt that it was necessary for me to come back and address this topic once again. And so it occurred this week. This is October the 6th. And it's about a case in Texas at Odessa Regional Medical Center where a young man, 18 years old, allegedly stormed into a hospital nursery and attacked several staff, including nurses, and at least 2 newborn babies were physically assaulted. Eventually, he was stopped by one of the staff persons, and then, security was able to intervene and help restrain this individual. Now, when police arrived, and who knows, there's no timeline in this article because, it's something that's new and there aren't a lot of details published yet, but this individual began struggling with the police officers as well. So at this point, they're looking at multiple criminal charges against this individual. Okay. Trespassing, those physical assaults, resisting arrest, etc. Okay. And this person was allegedly in the hospital, there visiting someone who was in labor. Okay. So it's not clear, how their attention was drawn onto these other individuals and to begin this attack. But it was said that, the person was mumbling and made some unintelligible statement. Okay. When they were asked to leave the hospital. Now, because he was acting odd and unreasonable prior to the attack. Okay, so it doesn't say what was odd or unreasonable. However, at that point in time, I feel if there's odd and unreasonable behavior being exhibited, perhaps that would have been the time to call security before things escalated. Okay. It's not clear from this article that that is what occurred. And this individual had time to carry out their attack on staff as well as patients. So hear what I'm saying now. When I speak about nurses being heard, this is no joke, people, because being heard also has another component to it, which means that there needs to be some action taken on the part of the recipient of the message that is being given, okay? Otherwise, you're just a talking head. And let's face it, from what happened as a result of COVID, and, the increase in travel nursing and the increased rates and so on and so forth, because of the high nature of risk, as well as the extremely inflated patient care assignments and the hours of work that was demanded, that's pretty much tapering down, trickling back down to pre-pandemic levels. And yet and still, many of the issues that I have said, and many have said, were long-standing issues prior to the pandemic continue to exist, and in fact may even be exacerbated to some degree. Because we look at now these incidences of violence in the healthcare workplace, and it's pretty much mirroring what's going on in society at large right now. People walking into stores, randomly attacking people, walking into places of worship, with intention to do harm and successfully carrying it out. People doing things at weddings and funerals and parties where celebrations are taking place among family and friends. It's just a significant rise in this disruption of everyday life from people that are in the environment, right? They're in the community, not even at large, but within the local community, you have these things happening. And these are places and events that are occurring where people are most vulnerable, right? Who would think you'd be at a children's party and somebody would start shooting? Who would think that you'd be at a high school sporting event and somebody would, be there with a weapon or create a disturbance where people are injured or can even sustain loss of life? And we have it in the house, in the hospital environment now more frequently. Okay. And again, I'm not the first person to jump up and say, hey, it's a mental health issue. In some cases, it could be a person is mentally ill and, may become violent. But that's not always the case, as I've said before, But just reading this story about what occurred in this hospital in Texas, this is an 18-year-old. The article says man, and yes, legally, this person may be an adult, but there's a photo of him. He looks very much like a boy. He looks very much like a boy. I mean, 18 years old, as far as I'm concerned, is still a child, right? Legally, maybe an adult, but looking at an 18-year-old today, they're children. They're still children, right? And it's unfortunate because it may take a very long time and a very lengthy process of investigation to really identify the traumas in his life, that led up to that, that act of violence. But, that might not get the attention. The attention is on what the individual allegedly did. Ultimately, that's going to, be what the news is going to really disclose, at least in the beginning, right? So I just kind of want to say that we really need to step up our game collectively out there as nurses who work in these facilities and those who support nurses. All right. So, those that are really heavily involved in those collective bargaining organizations, those in administration, those nurses in administration, and really get behind your frontline staff. You really need to get behind your frontline personnel and push this agenda for safety in the workplace. Because again, you're there for 8, 10, 12 hours and virtually sitting ducks, right? Because who knows what level of security is at these places. As far as I know, entrances to nurseries, yes, they're locked, but they should also be under surveillance by security. There should be a security outside every nursery, right? There should be panic buttons that automatically go to security when something is happening that's unsafe. Okay. And it should be escalated to involve local law enforcement when necessary, because you don't know what that person is going to pull out. They could pull out a firearm and harm a lot of people in a short amount of time. They could pull out a knife and harm a lot of people in a short amount of time. It's not, because we're not dealing with a workforce that's equipped to handle violence. Again, right? They're there doing a job to take care of the sick. That's their mission. They're not there to fight with people or to have to defend themselves. And quite frankly, I don't even think they're thinking of what mechanism they could implement to defend themselves when they get ready to go to work every day, right? Who's thinking about that? Meanwhile, there's some random person out there thinking about what they can use in your environment to harm you, be it a chair, be it an IV pole, be it, some piece of equipment that they can throw at your head. I mean, these are things that go through people's minds when they're in a state of rage, perhaps, or even just a very calm and collected, homicidal ideation, like I'm gonna, take some heads today. So they're not prepared in the hospital to handle these situations or even to de-escalate them quickly enough before they even realize what's happening to them. So this is where we need really some more training. There really needs to be some more training of hospital workers, particularly of nurses, in self-defense, in, using things in your environment to help save your life, whatever that may be. And it needs to be, policies and procedures need to be revised to look at to say, hey, if you have to do something to save yourself or to protect some patients who are vulnerable, there needs to be no liability for these things, because it's getting to the point where you have to have the same rights and protections as law enforcement out there, right? If a police officer is going to do something to defend themselves, you should be able to do something to defend yourself too, and not have to be concerned with, being brought up in charges and arrested and put in jail because you just want to go home at the end of your shift. So these are things that we need to be starting to raise awareness of and include in your collective bargaining request. It's not, as I said before, it's not just about an extra money or increase in staffing or, more days off or better healthcare benefits. Yes, those are the basic things that we all been fighting for since time immemorial. Yes, we know, yada, yada, yada. But you can have all that and walk into work and not make it out. And then what? Because they wanted to save money on security by giving you an extra, $5,000 over 3 years. Really? I say, give me the security. Put the security there so I can come and do my job in peace. I mean, let's face it. We already know that it's the healthcare, this capitalistic healthcare system cannot sustain the high amount of salaries that nurses really want. Let's face it, it's not that model. There's going to be profits made before you look at what compensation is going to be for the masses of people that are employees in all these places. And nurses are not the only ones that have to get paid. You have a lot of other ancillary staff, a lot of other professional staff that's providing care and services as well. They all want the same things. But everybody has a right to safety when they go to work, particularly in an environment that's very vulnerable, particularly in an environment where people can just walk in and pretty much go wherever they want to go and roam around. Okay, because you can have an intention to say, yes, my name is John Doe, Jane Doe, and I have an appointment here, or if I'm going to visit this person or what have you. But you shouldn't be able to just go anywhere, get off on any floor, wander around in any place. No. Your movements as a visitor should have some restrictions on them. And you should have to present with ID to get into a place so they know every person that's on the premises. Would that be a challenge? Perhaps yes. Would that require more, personnel at the front desk? Yes. Would that require people to maybe get online before you can get into a hospital? Yes. But would it save lives? I'd venture to say absolutely it would. Passing through metal detectors, things of that nature. If you're going to a hospital, why you need a gun? Why you need a knife? Just saying. There needs to be some place to check that. No, you can't go upstairs with that. Right? These are things that are going to be happening. And I'm telling you, I'm making a prediction. I'm stepping out on a limb to say that, it used to be back in the day where people would be afraid or reluctant to go into a hospital because they might feel like they might not come out, either because of their illness may worsen or a botched procedure or something is done to them and they just go in a coma and never wake up again, or because of a lack of trust of the establishment. But in the future days, I would venture to say that a lot of people are not going to want to even go into a hospital because it's just not going to be safe to do it. You think people are listening right now? I don't know if they're listening or not. I don't even know if they even care or think about making an investment in healthcare and safety in the healthcare environment. But people are going to be afraid just to go to these places just because it's not going to be safe. So if you think that, nurses are leaving just because of the money, think again. There's more to it. And if you're reading about different things occurring in the industry, you'll also be aware of a push to these hospital at home programs where hospitals really want people to be managed at home, their illness to be, and this is a step above your normal, home care services where somebody, does a wound care dressing or checks your vital signs, or maybe you have, your respiratory rate or your blood pressure, your blood sugar monitored. I'm not talking about those type of things. I'm talking about real hardcore, ICU equipment in your house as the norm with staff coming and going. Look, this is the trend for you to be cared for at home. Now, how that's going to play out on a large scale, I don't know. I'm watching it though, but it's risky. So for those of you who are inclined to add that to your practice experience, you might want to check with your malpractice insurance carrier just to make sure you're covered under those work areas, because you may be covered as a hospital employee, but there may be some limitations once you go out in the field to do work. It's always good to have your own coverage as well as an individual clinician, because you just want to make sure that everything you're doing is covered, right? And this way, if there's any accusations, because there might not be any witnesses, it might just be you and the patient, wherein you need some legal defense, right, for your own actions, or, to face any particular accusations. You need to have that for yourself, because if somebody accuses you of something criminal, your facility may not cover that at all. right? So you need to have your own coverage as a defense for yourself. And you need to make sure that these policies and procedures are in place before you go out there doing certain things. You know, how are things going to be monitored for the patient? What's the backup plan? You know, what happens in a power outage when these equipment that they have in the home fail? Is everything being delivered to the home able to work on the battery system in case there's a power outage? You know, what's your degree of liability out there? The facility needs to figure it out for themselves, of course. But what is your personal liability as it relates to you going out there and identifying these issues? Because if there's no backup source of energy, is this person even appropriate to have equipment put in their home? Like, go figure. You know, there's storms hitting all the time in different areas of the country. You don't know. Suppose somebody doesn't even pay their electrical bill and their utility company doesn't even know they have this equipment in the home. Lights out, and with the lights goes the equipment and everything else for their safe monitoring. So these are all things to take into consideration when you remove yourself to practice from a controlled environment in a facility to an uncontrolled environment, which is somebody's home. Okay, these are things to think, and you need to think about safety out there as well too. Let's face it, because the more and more these people fight for their firearms, you know, to maintain their gun rights and privileges, you don't know when you're walking into the home of a person who has, you know, a stash of arsenal that, you know, outweighs the United States military. You don't know what they have in their house, behind hidden doors or walls or in attics or cellars. You don't know what their relatives are into that are also coming and going. So these are all things to take into consideration. Your safety has to be your priority wherever you work. Right? And so I think that's it for now. I think the message was clear. If not, we can talk about it again. We can talk about it further. Those of you who want to share your experiences in the comments where you might have felt unsafe. Did you take it up the chain? Did you bring it to your organization's leadership? And if you did, what, if anything, did they do about it? What was the resolution? Were you heard? Share it with us. Let us know what's working, and let us know what needs to happen. This is Nurses Speak. This is your channel where nurses can be heard and no topic is off limits. Thank you. Bye.